was just like, all right, man, we played enough defense. 2026 is all offense.
Somewhere in a federal courthouse in Manhattan, a stack of legal filings is quietly rewriting one of the most explosive celebrity stories of the decade. It didn't start with Jay-Z. It started with someone else entirely, Sean Combs, a name that had already become synonymous with scandal, facing a wave of accusers that seemed to grow by the month.
In the day, just to tell the truth, so hopefully we can get down to the bottom of this. I'm 100%, the charges against me are 100% false, and hopefully due to time, we'll start to see that.
But in December of 2024, an amended lawsuit dropped a second name into the middle of it, a name nobody expected. One of the most powerful men in music, a billionaire, a husband, a father, a man who had spent 3 decades building a reputation as untouchable.
We do have some breaking news that we want to bring to you. It was being reported by TMZ and now Fox News. We are learning that Jay-Z is accused of a 13-year-old girl. That is new in the Diddy lawsuit.
And what happened next wasn't silence. It wasn't a quiet settlement behind closed doors, the way these things so often go, when the stakes are this high and the accusation this ugly. It was war. This is the story of what happens when an accusation doesn't just get denied, it gets answered with a lawsuit, then another, then one against a company, then one against a lawyer's other clients. By the end of this video, you'll see how the accusation surfaced, why it was suddenly dropped without a word of explanation, and why Jay-Z chose not to walk away quietly, but to go on what he himself has publicly called all offense. We'll walk through the doorstep recording that became contested evidence and the 2 wildly different ways a judge and a defense attorney have described what's actually on that tape. The accusations of a fabricated death threat, the financial numbers Jay-Z's team says his reputation cost him, down to the exact credit lines that were denied, and the string of court rulings, some wins, some losses, some outcomes even the judges themselves seem unsure about, that have kept the story alive far longer than anyone expected. We'll also show you how this fight bled outward, pulling in a company, other accusers, and other lawyers who had nothing to do with the original case. This is not a story about who's telling the truth. No court has decided that yet, and we're not going to pretend otherwise. This is a story about what happens in the space before the truth is decided, when reputation, power, and money collide in real time in full public view. To understand this story, you have to go back to the fall of 2024, when Sean Combs' entire world was collapsing in real time. By October of that year, Combs was already facing a wave of civil lawsuits alleging sexual misconduct stretching back decades. Accusations that would eventually number in the dozens, filed from former employees, former partners, and people who claimed to have witnessed or survived abuse at his parties. The scale of it was almost impossible to keep up with. New filings seemed to arrive weekly, each one adding another name, another date, another alleged incident to an already staggering timeline. One of those lawsuits came from an anonymous woman, referred to in court only as Jane Doe, who alleged she had been sexually assaulted at an after-party following the 2000 MTV Video Music Awards, when she was just 13 years old. It was, even by the standards of the Combs allegations, one of the most disturbing claims to surface.
We intend to name people in these lawsuits. We're not going to do it in interviews. We're not going to do it without doing our due diligence, because obviously, these types of allegations.
At first, her lawsuit named only Combs. Then, in December 2024, everything changed. Doe's legal team, led by Houston attorney Tony Buzbee, a lawyer by that point who had filed dozens of lawsuits connected to the Combs scandal, representing accuser after accuser in a legal campaign that had made him one of the most prominent and most controversial figures in the entire saga, amended the complaint. This time, it named a second man as an alleged co-assailant at that same after-party, claiming the 2 men had taken turns assaulting her. Jay-Z. The reaction was immediate and seismic. This wasn't a minor industry figure being swept up in a wider scandal. This was one of the most decorated artists in music history, a cultural institution, married to arguably the biggest star in the world. According to Jay-Z's own account, in the weeks before that amendment, Buzbee had sent him a private demand letter seeking a confidential mediation before any public filing. Jay-Z has said he refused. He has described that letter as feeling like an existential threat and claims that his refusal to negotiate privately is exactly why his name appeared in the amended lawsuit weeks later in open court for the entire world to see.
Really hard. I was like heartbroken. I'm glad we got right to that, so we could just get that out the way.
Okay.
Like, I was really heartbroken by like everything that occurred.
Buzbee has told a different story, that Doe had the legal right to seek private mediation before filing publicly, that the process was standard, and that there was nothing improper about it at all. Jay-Z denied the allegations immediately and completely. In a later interview with GQ, he described a range of emotions: heartbreak, anger, and what he called an uncontrollable fury, saying the lawsuit took a lot out of him. He said settling the case, even though it might have been financially cheaper and faster, was never something he seriously considered. He told the magazine that agreeing to any kind of settlement simply wasn't in his nature, and that the very first thing he did, before anything else, was sit down and tell his wife Beyoncé what was happening. For a few months, the case moved through the courts like any other high-profile lawsuit. Filings, procedural motions, the slow, grinding machinery of civil litigation. Publicly, it looked like it might simply fade the way so many celebrity lawsuits do, buried under new headlines and the next news cycle. And then, on Valentine's Day 2025, it took its first major turn. On February 14, 2025, Jane Doe voluntarily dismissed her lawsuit against Jay-Z. No public explanation was given, no statement, no press conference, nothing beyond a brief court filing withdrawing the claim. For most public figures, that would be the end of the story. The accusation goes away, you move on quietly, grateful the headlines fade, and you let time do the work of rebuilding whatever reputation took the hit. That is not what happened here. Instead, Jay-Z's legal team went on the attack, filing not one, but a growing web of lawsuits against the very people who had accused him.
It's obviously getting a whole new wave of attention and more focused attention on this victim. So I think it's going to be tied to the media cycle, if I had to guess, and how these rulings continue. And they have this celebrity name that is sort of waiting to take over the headlines when they choose to release it.
What followed wasn't a single case, it was the opening of an entirely new front in this war, one that would eventually stretch across the country. The first came in Los Angeles, where Jay-Z sued Tony Buzbee directly, alleging extortion and defamation. His claim that Buzbee knew the allegations were false from the start and used them anyway as leverage, first with the private demand letter and then with the public filing when that leverage didn't produce the result he wanted.
It's interesting because, obviously this civil suit was coming for a while.
Yep.
And there was some talk between Buzbee and Jay-Z's lawyers. I think both Buzbee and Jay-Z's lawyers are really alphas.
Then, weeks later, a second lawsuit landed in Alabama, Doe's home state, this time against Jane Doe herself, along with Buzbee and his co-counsel, David Fortney. Jay-Z accused all three of malicious prosecution, abuse of process, and civil conspiracy. His lawyers went further than a simple denial. They alleged that Doe had privately admitted directly to people connected to Jay-Z that her story wasn't true, that the entire account had been, in the words of the complaint, a deliberate and malicious fabrication designed to inflict maximum damage. Buzbee categorically rejected that claim. He said the quotes attributed to Doe were either invented outright or came from a conversation with someone who wasn't actually her at all.
A lot of people allowed it to go on, said nothing, didn't intervene, maybe benefited from it, profited from it. All of these individuals and entities, in my view, have exposure here.
And then came the recording. Private investigators working on Jay-Z's behalf approached Doe at her home in Alabama in February 2025, unannounced, without warning, arriving at her door in a way that immediately raises questions about intent and pressure. A portion of that doorstep conversation was later made public through court filings, and it became one of the single most contested pieces of evidence in the entire case. In the recording, an investigator can be heard asking Doe directly whether Jay-Z was present at the afterparty, but had nothing to do with any sexual acts against her. A leading question, framed in a way clearly designed to produce a specific answer. Buzbee called the recording a pieced-together fabrication, insisting it had been selectively edited to manufacture a false impression. But when a Los Angeles judge reviewed the full, unedited audio as part of the extortion case, his read of it was strikingly different. And this is where the story takes on real weight. He wrote that Doe's voice shakes throughout the recording, that she is concerned and distressed by the fact that investigators had found her at home, and at one point responds in a voice that is barely a whisper. He specifically rejected the investigators' own characterization that she had been calm and relaxed, writing bluntly, "That is not what the court heard." This is where the story stops being a simple denial versus accusation. This is where it becomes a fight over what actually happened on that doorstep, over whose interpretation of a recording gets to define the narrative, and over what it says about power, pressure, and who gets to control the story once it's already gone public. If there is one moment where this case fundamentally changes shape, it's not the original accusation, and it's not even the dismissal. It's what came after, the decision to escalate rather than retreat. Because Jay-Z didn't just want the case gone, he wanted accountability, and he wanted it delivered on his terms, in courtrooms of his own choosing, using the full weight of his legal and financial resources. In June 2025, a Los Angeles judge dismissed Jay-Z's extortion and defamation claims against Buzbee. But the way he dismissed them is almost as important as the dismissal itself. In a 65-page ruling, an unusually long and detailed opinion for a motion like this, Judge Mark Epstein admitted he wasn't wholly satisfied that he'd reached the right conclusion. He wrote candidly that he was struggling with the decision and that he would rather let a higher court sort out whether he'd gotten it right. He ended his opinion with 2 words that tell you everything about how unresolved this case really is. Stay tuned. It's rare for a judge to write with that kind of open uncertainty in a case this high profile. It tells you this isn't a simple, clear-cut dismissal. It's a coin flip that could have gone either way. Jay-Z appealed immediately. Meanwhile, the Alabama case against Doe and Buzbee kept moving on a completely separate track. In March 2026, an Alabama judge declined to dismiss it outright, but ruled that Alabama wasn't the proper venue for a case this complex and transferred the entire matter to the Southern District of New York, where it landed in front of U.S. District Judge Annalisa Torres. That transfer changed everything about the scale of this fight, because in his amended New York filing, Jay-Z's legal team went further than ever before, laying out what they describe as the central act of deception in the entire saga. They alleged that Buzbee and his co-counsel, David Fortney, had fabricated a death threat, telling Doe that Jay-Z himself had threatened her life, specifically to pressure her into voluntarily dropping her original lawsuit before anyone could examine it too closely. According to the filing, the real reason Buzbee wanted the case dismissed on that particular day wasn't a threat at all. It was timing. Jay-Z's team claims that Buzbee had been caught practicing law in a federal court where he wasn't authorized to appear. A serious professional violation that could have triggered sanctions across more than 20 other cases he had pending in that same court, and needed Doe's case to disappear before that problem caught up with him publicly. Buzbee has denied all of it, calling the claims part of a broader pattern of intimidation aimed at him and his clients. And now, for the first time, we see the real financial stakes emerge in black and white. Jay-Z's team says the allegations cost him $190 million, lost contracts in sports and entertainment programming worth at least $20 million on their own, a denied $55 million personal line of credit, and a rejected $115 million loan for his company, Rock Nation. If the court ultimately agrees that fraud was committed against the tribunal itself, that number could triple, pushing the claim well past $500 million. This is no longer a story about one lawsuit. It's a story about a reputation measured in 9 figures and a legal fight with genuinely enormous financial consequences riding on its outcome. By the summer of 2026, the war had spread far beyond Jay-Z and Doe, pulling in people who had never even been party to the original lawsuit. In Texas, 2 of Buzbee's other former clients, men named Gerardo Garcia and Jose Maldonado, both connected to separate Combs-related litigation, filed their own lawsuit, this time against Jay-Z's company, Rock Nation, directly. They alleged that Rock Nation's investigators had targeted them personally, with one plaintiff claiming investigators showed up at his home specifically to pressure him into suing his own former attorney, Buzbee, for malpractice, essentially turning Buzbee's own clients against him as a legal strategy. On June 16, 2026, Texas State Judge Kristen Hawkins dismissed those claims, not on the underlying facts, but on jurisdiction. The court ruled it simply didn't have the legal authority to hear a case with such thin ties to Texas. It was a real win for Jay-Z's side, handed down in unambiguous terms, but a narrow one, a procedural victory rather than a verdict on what actually happened. Buzbee has publicly confirmed he intends to refile the claims somewhere else, in a jurisdiction where they might stick. At the same time, a separate defamation lawsuit, $25 million worth, was filed against Buzbee in a different Texas federal court, this time by Marcy Croft, an attorney connected to Jay-Z's philanthropic arm, Team Rock. Croft alleges Buzbee ran a smear campaign against her, accusing her of illegal client solicitation, bribery, intimidation, and obstruction of justice, claims Buzbee denies just as forcefully as everything else. 4 states, 4 courts, dozens of filings spanning extortion, defamation, malicious prosecution, and civil conspiracy. And at the center of it, a story that started with one allegation involving one after-party in the year 2000 has grown into an entire legal ecosystem, one with its own cast of secondary characters, its own smaller lawsuits, its own separate battles being fought in parallel. Discovery in the New York case, the biggest and most consequential of them all, is scheduled to run through the end of 2026, with initial disclosures required by early June. That means sworn depositions. That means documents that have never been public. That means testimony, under oath, from the very people whose public statements have shaped this story for 2 years. It's the process that could either validate Jay-Z's version of events in full, expose new problems with the case against him, or complicate the picture in ways nobody involved has fully anticipated yet. Here is what remains genuinely, completely unresolved. No court has ever ruled on whether the original assault allegation was true or false. The case was dismissed before that underlying question could ever be examined on its merits. No court has ruled on whether Buzbee and Fortney fabricated a death threat, as Jay-Z's team now alleges in sworn filings. No court has ruled on whether Doe's private statements to investigators, if she made them at all, were truthful admissions or the product of fear and pressure. And no court has ruled on whether Doe was, as the Los Angeles judge suggested in his own written opinion, genuinely distressed and intimidated on that doorstep, or whether that characterization overstates what actually happened. What we're left with, 2 years in, is not a verdict. It's a standoff. Two very different stories, both defended with equal ferocity, both backed by lawyers who show absolutely no sign of backing down, and both waiting on a discovery process that hasn't even finished collecting the evidence yet. Maybe that's the real story here. Not simply who's right and who's wrong, because right now, genuinely, nobody outside these courtrooms can say for certain. But what a person with enough resources, enough conviction, and enough at stake is willing to do when their name, their marriage, and their legacy are the things hanging in the balance. The courts are still deciding. The discovery process is still unfolding, with sworn testimony yet to come, and somewhere between now and the end of 2026, we may finally get answers that, right now, simply don't exist. Answers that could either close this chapter for good or open up an entirely new one. If this story raised questions for you about power, about accountability, about what happens when accusations collide with billion-dollar reputations, let us know in the comments below. What do you think this case reveals about how celebrity legal battles actually get fought? And if you want to understand the bigger picture this all connects to, including the Sean Combs case that started it, and the dozens of other accusers still waiting for their own day in court, we've got that story waiting for you next. Make sure you're subscribed and you've got notifications turned on, because based on the discovery schedule alone, this one is far from over. And we'll be here to break down whatever comes next.